Hi, and welcome back to another video from Effective Dashboards. In this video I'm going to be talking about a DAX function called UseRelationship. And I'm going to be talking you through an example where I've actually used this DAX function in a risk management dashboard. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just show you where they actually used this, this approach. So we're in a scenario where we've got a list of work orders, and this is a risk management dashboard that I've created. So there's a few other screens on here, and I've got an actual course. If you look in the description below, I've got a course that's going to talk you through exactly how I created this whole dashboard from beginning to end. But one of the challenges I had was that we've got a list of work orders, and each work order, so each row in the table, which was a work order, a defect in essence, or that an instruction to go and fix a defect, had a risk, and the risk is assessed prior to mitigation being put in place and after mitigation has been put in place. So each work order has got two risk values, a pre and a post mitigation, and we can see that these values are captured here in a matrix, and the matrix is a 5x5 matrix with the consequence, severity and the likelihood along the x and y axis, and each one of these cells has got a value, and it's called a risk ranking value, and it's basically the multiplication of the likelihood and the severity. So this value here, this cell here, its actual risk ranking value would be 25. 5 times 5. This one here would be 20, that's 5 times 4. Okay, and this one here would be 16, it's 4 times 4. And we can see it here. So what we've done is we've listed all of the different risk ranking values that are represented, and for each one we've got a pre-risk value, which is the value here in this matrix, and or the count of the number of values here. So we can see for 20, which would be 5 times 4, we've got 4, and then we've got the value in the same table for the post mitigation value, which is a count of 1. So at 20 we've got 1, and then we've got a difference, and we've got a difference as a percentage. So this is the challenge I had, and this is where I used the UseRelationship function. So just a couple of minutes there talking you through the setup to this, just to give you a little bit of an idea about how I used this. And the next thing we're going to do is go and recreate it. Okay, so I've simplified the dashboard here. This is just really going to focus in on this table here. And at the moment what I've done is I've got the two values here. We've got the risk ranking post mitigation, so that's after mitigation has been put in place, and we can see that at 20 we've got 1, at 15 we've got 1, at 12 we've got 8, etc, etc. So that's a count of the number of work orders that would have fallen within that section of the risk matrix, the 5x5 risk matrix. The next thing I want to do is, if I want to show, and I've shown the count here, so that count is just a really straightforward count rows of the work order data table. So that's all I'm doing here. Now I will point out as well that each one of these has also got a filter on the, just to show the most recent week. Okay, so if you look at this data model, you can get a link to it below in the description. There is another filter here that just filters this for the most recent list of work orders, because there is a date element to this as well. But for all intents and purposes, this is just showing the number of work orders which have a risk ranking, a post mitigation risk ranking of 20, 15, etc. But we also want to see a number of work orders which have got a pre-mitigation risk ranking value. So if I pull that in to here and I stop it summarizing, we can see the issue that we've got here. So the pre-value, let's just go and sort this, is 20, but what's happening here, this measure here is actually counting and aggregating the number of work orders which have got a pre-mitigation value of 20 and a post-mitigation value of 4, and we can see there's one work order falls into that category. The next one is there's one work order with a pre-mitigation value of 20 and 6, etc, etc. But if we get down here, it's aggregating the value, and we've got 2 work orders that went from 15 to 2. So that's not exactly what we need at all. So that we can't use that as an approach. The next approach we could use would be to create 2 tables. So each one of these tables has got, still using this work order count, but I've basically got two tables with two different axes. One has got the risk ranking pre-mitigation and one has got the risk ranking post-mitigation. But that's not particularly clever either, because you've got to look at the 20, okay, there's 4 that are at 20 and there is 1, and we've got to kind of calculate the difference ourselves. And we can see this one here is another case in point. We've got 1 at 16, there's none at 16 here, so that even if you try to line these up, they're going to go out of sync. And there's duplicate values, etc. So in the risk ranking axis there. So that's not a particularly great approach either. So the approach I used was to create a new table, and that table contained all of the possible risk ranking values, and that table was going to act as a common axis that we could use, and we can use relationships between the risk ranking post mitigation and the risk ranking pre mitigation to build out the table in a format that we were actually looking for. So if I go into data here, I've just added a new table there, and these are all the possible multiplications between the severity and the likelihood. So we've got 25, which would be 5 times 5, we've got 20, which would be 4 times 5, 16, which is the 4 times 4, etc, etc. Okay, so that's going to be our common axis. Then we've got to go and create a relationship between this common axis, our list of risk ranking values, and the two values here. So the first thing is you can only have one active relationship at any point, and that will be the default relationship that any measures will use when they're being calculated. So the one which we're going to use is going to be the risk ranking post mitigation, because that's the most likely relationship that we're going to use if we create other measures, because that's the current risk that we are basically living with. So let's create that to the risk ranking post mitigation. So now we've got that in place, let's go back and we can go in here and we can go into this table here and we can replace this value here, which is from the work order table, work order data table. I can take that out and I can replace it with this value here. And what we see now is that the work order count measure, because there's a relationship here, is looking for a risk ranking of 20, is following this relationship down, and it's counting the number of rows in this table where the risk ranking post mitigation equals 20. Okay, so that's basically what's happening here. That measure is able to follow this relationship here and count the number of work orders that fall into this category there. And the 20 is the filter context that's provided by this row here. Okay, and then 15, 12, 8, etc. So that's great. So the next thing we need to do is a similar relationship between the risk ranking and common axis or independent axis and the risk ranking pre-mitigation. So let's pull that in here. Now we can see here this has got a dotted line, and if I double click on here we can see the relationship's been created but it's inactive. So if I try and make that active, it's going to tell us that basically you can only have one relationship active at any point, or one default relationship active. However, what I have done is I've informed the Power BI model that there is a relationship between the independent value in risk ranking and this risk ranking pre-mitigation. Okay, so I've told it that there's a relationship there, but I need to tell the model to invoke or to use that relationship. It won't use it by default. Okay, and that's where use relationship as a DAX function comes in and is used. So there's a lot of setup here to basically get us to the point where I can explain how we're going to use this use relationship function, but that's exactly where we're going to use it, to invoke this relationship when we want to count a list of work orders. So let's go back into our table here. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new measure, and that's where we're going to invoke this relationship. So we're going to call this measure work order count, call it use relationship. And the relationship is going to be with risk rank pre-mitigation. Okay, now I'll probably shorten that later, but we'll leave it for that for just now. Now the next thing we need to do is we need to use a calculate statement, and that's because we're going to change we're going to modify the filter context here. So the default filter context is going to basically look at the default relationship between the two tables, which is based on the risk ranking post mitigation, but we're going to tell it to use a different relationship. So we need to use calculate. Now the expression we're going to use is going to be to count the number of rows, so it's going to be exactly the same relationship as, or the same measure as the default work order count. So count rows, and the table is just going to be the work order data. So a really straightforward relationship for the expression. And then the filter, well, we're not going to use a filter, we're going to use the use relationship function. And it's a really straightforward function. It only has two inputs, or two arguments, which are the two field names from each of the tables that you want to invoke the relationship for. So the first thing is going to be, and I don't even think it matters which order they go in. So we're going to use this risk ranking field here as the first one. And the second one is going to be the work order data, and it's going to be risk ranking pre-mitigation. Okay, and we can put and I think that's it to just sort that out. Okay, so we've now, for this measure and for this measure only, we've informed the DAX engine to use that relationship when it's counting the work order rows. So let's go and add that into our table. I'm going to stick it in the middle there because it's going to be the one that we want before, because we want a pre and a post. So now we can see, I'll just tidy this up a little bit, that we've got this independent axis here. For this count here, we're going to invoke the relationship which is between risk ranking and the risk ranking pre-mitigation, and it's going to count the number of work orders in this table which have got a pre-mitigation value of 20 in the instance for this first one, and there's four work orders in this table here. They've got a pre-mitigation value of 20. And then for this measure here, it's going to invoke the default relationship, which is this one here, and it's going to then join this risk ranking here. So say we're using the first one, the filter context will be 20, and it's going to go and count the number of work orders where the risk ranking post mitigation value is 20. And we can see there's one of those. Okay, so that's given us exactly what we need using this use relationships function. Just to finalize, let's put in a difference here. So I'm going to go and create another measure. And we're going to put in the work order count, pre-post mitigation diff. And it's just going to be the work order count minus the work order count use relationships. I'm not sure why we've got this tiny little box here with a list of measures, but we've got that anyway. And I just need to put that in here, and here we have it. Okay, we've got the difference here. So in one single table, we've got the common access, we've got the number of work orders post-mitigation, pre-mitigation, sorry, number of work orders post-mitigation, and we're able to calculate the difference. So we're going and tidy up some of these values here, but it's important that you call out that this work order count is using a different relationship. Okay, it's important that that's indicated in this description here, so you don't get confused with this one here, which is going to be the work order count we'll use most of the time. And yeah, so hopefully that's been useful, and it's been an example of how we can use this. And you can perhaps use it if you've got come across a similar situation in your data model. If you like this video, then give it a thumbs up. And if you're interested in keeping up to date with the latest videos that I release every month or every week, normally every week, then hit the subscribe button and you'll get a notification whenever I release a new video. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you in the next video.